So what is our role as digital professionals, as individuals, as agencies, and as an industry as a whole to respond positively to the climate emergency in which we find ourselves? I think that during these uncertain, crazy times, it's important now more than ever to reflect and reevaluate what is we're really doing with our lives and our professional, and our profession, and to ask how we can contribute to make the world a better place. And ultimately, what world do we want to emerge into after the lockdown is over? And what part do we play in shaping this? So, can digital agencies save the planet? Whilst we'll struggle to do anything on our own, I certainly think that we have a major role to play. And with the wealth of knowledge and skills and creativity within our industry, it would be a huge missed opportunity if we didn't at least try. So today we have a great lineup of speakers, guest speakers, who will be sharing their knowledge, their expertise, and their unique perspective to how we can respond to the climate emergency. So starting with me, my name is Will Saunders. I'll introduce myself a bit more formally later on. And I'm the host for this session. I'm a creative designer at Goodwill Studios, the ethical design studio, and a founder of Sustainable Agencies Initiative, of which this event is part of. And we have James Bate, who's a sustainability consultant who currently works at Bulb Energy. I'm really happy to have him involved because he'll be talking about creating a culture of sustainability within our organizations. And then we have Sarah Hawthorne from the PR agency Infusion Comms, who work primarily with renewable energy companies and within the manufacturing sector. And she'll be talking about how we need to adapt to this new world and how our agency models need to change. Then we have Ben Tung, who's the head of sustainability at NHS Digital. He's got vast experience in sustainable tech, and Ben is focused on driving the agenda in sustainable tech and how we can all become more climate resilient. He'll be challenging us to ask ourselves, what can really save the planet? Then we have Fiona Bradley, who is an awesome marketing professional with a focus on sustainability. And she'll be talking about using technology for good and if we can bake sustainability practices into everyday aspects of our lives. Following Fiona, we have Rob Greenland, who's a well-known guy in the sustainability space. He's representing Zero Waste Leeds, and he'll be talking about how Leeds is leading by example and how the stay-at-home lockdown is helping us shift our thinking and change our behaviours. And finally, we have Jess Wiles from my favourite environmental charity, Hubbub, and she'll be showcasing some inspiring public campaigns that they've done that have helped shift the conversation and have influenced behaviour change to help us live more environmentally. And then following these awesome talks, there'll be a Q&A session and a panel discussion where we'll be taking your questions and hopefully answering them. So, are we all ready to begin? Thumbs up, good. So, I love Leeds. It is my adopted hometown for the past decade. I'm so proud to live and work here. It's an amazing place and it's home to some of the most innovative, creative digital agencies in the country, and it's home to a thriving tech sector. And I'd like to thank everybody at the Leeds Digital Festival for making this happen and for supporting the goal of being the most sustainable tech event ever. So I'd like to thank Stuart Clark, Katie, Haley, and all the people involved in promoting this event and making it happen. And the fact that we've been forced to do this online instead of face-to-face as planned has actually made this more sustainable, ironically. So Leeds City Council have announced a climate emergency, which underscores the importance of what we're doing, what we're talking about here. And as I said, Leeds digital sector is booming with over 100,000 creative, forward-thinking and problem-solving individuals within the digital sector. So we have no bigger problem facing us than climate breakdown. And we can't go on as business as usual. We need something to change because there's no business, there's no digital agencies, there's none of us on a dead planet. So we need to act and act now. So I'm sure we're all feeling a bit of disruption at the moment. We're currently living through an unprecedented disruption due to the coronavirus and lockdown. We've been forced to change the way we live and work and adapt. But this disruption really is nothing compared to the levels of disruption the results of climate breakdown will have on our society. So I'm asking, what can we learn from the lockdown? What have we already learned? How have we already adapted? And how can we become more resilient as individuals, as digital agencies and society when faced with the biggest problem of our generation? Luckily, we have you and your colleagues, your bosses, your friends and family, your networks outside of this Zoom call who have the skills, the creativity and the ideas and the resources to do something about it. As much as I believe big industry and governments need to act, we each have a responsibility to do what we can in any capacity that we can, really. And big organizations are ultimately made up of individual people. So I want to help inspire people power, inspire business leaders to act, and to inspire collective action. So what can we do together? We can create a network of agencies who are committed to reducing their footprint, who are reflecting on their own business practices and using their skills and creativity for good. We need to empower our teams, so our digital teams, to give the people the tools and the inspiration they need to become champions and drive the change that's really needed. To create meaningful partnerships to maximize our impact, because we can't do this in isolation. And there are plenty of groups that are actively working towards a more sustainable city of Leeds, so we need to join forces with them. And we need to build a framework. So a framework for all agencies across the UK to adopt. So we have a common understanding of success, a shared language to adopt, a unified measurement framework to help hold each other to account and support each other and view our progress as an industry. And finally, and importantly, make our industry carbon neutral by 2030. This is in line with what the science is telling us, so we need to act and act now and act together. So speaking of people power and people acting together, who am I? So those of you who don't know me, my name is Will Saunders. I'm a creative designer. I've been in the industry for about 15 years now. I've had many roles. I've been in-house, I've been freelancing, I've been contracting. I set up a small agency a few years ago. And more recently, I started Goodwill Studios, which is my agency, which I use my creativity for good, helping ethical and sustainable businesses and non-profits position themselves for success. And having lived in the digital creative world my whole professional life, I really know and understand the culture. We're all very busy. It's often quite boozy. It's fueled by pizza and coffee. And there's often not much time to think about anything outside of the project. You know, we're so involved in the technology and the design and everything. And we tend to think that we're doing okay environmentally because, you know, we are paper free. We're not producing real things, but there's still a lot we can do. And it's not just about making our own businesses greener and more resilient. It's importantly using our platforms, our resources, and our marketing skills to communicate this important message. So the question I've been asking myself, and now I'm asking you, is can we redesign the digital design industry for good? I think that we can. So when we talk about and approach climate change, it can feel like daunting, it can feel really scary and impossible to make a difference. So it's helpful to break things down into areas that we can understand and tackle. So I've identified 3 areas, I'm calling them the 3 Ps of agency climate change, which will help us do this. So the first one, you might not be surprised, is people. So how can we review our own behaviors and those of our colleagues and networks and review our climate footprints to inspire and empower them to make a positive change, and using our influence to do that? And the next one is properties. So this is not only reviewing and adapting our physical offices and workspaces, or now our kitchen tables, as we're all working from home. It's about the emissions of the data centers that run our apps and our websites, and how green is our hosting, etc. But also think about the positive potential of using our websites, our social channels, and our client projects to promote a sustainability message. And then finally, P, the final P, policy, which encompasses everything we do. So our policies are underscored by our values. So by reflecting on ourselves and our companies and our mission and goals, this may influence our approach to our projects and even move us to review who we work with in the future. So, as I said, it's important to do what we can do internally within the confines of our own business to make our own business practices, our teams, and our projects as sustainable as possible. And here's a few ways to achieve that. But the real impact is when we turn our focus outwards and use our incredible marketing skills, our design thinking, our technology, and everything that we have to promote an environmental message and thread it into everything we do. And we can do this in many practical ways. Some you can see here. And you can find an approach that works for you and your specific needs and your situation. But once you've decided that you're going to do something about it, you've decided that you really want to make a difference, the rest should come easy because you're living and working in line with your values as an individual or as an organization. And I believe if we do this together, along with pressuring government, creating partnerships with other industries, and collaborating with the various other groups that can help you, I believe we'll be able to create not only a better Leeds, but a better world. So that draws my talk and my introduction to this to a close. Thank you for your time. You can find out more and get involved by following the Twitter accounts on the screen now. And I will now pass you on to my next speaker, which is James. So James Bate, would you like to unmute yourself?
I will. Thanks for that.
No worries. I'm going to now make you the host so you can share your screen.
Okay.
And go from there.
Sure thing.
Over to you.
Is that worked now, Will? Can you see my screen?
Not yet. You might need to click the share screen at the bottom in the middle.
Is that on?
Yeah, here we go. I can see you. Great.
Perfect. Okay, let's get cracking. So hello, welcome. My name is James Bate, and this is my presentation on organisational change in favour of the climate. In this short amount of time, I want to introduce the idea of creating a climate-conscious culture at your organisation or agency. Culture is where sustainability and climate action are embedded throughout the organization from the top down and bottom up. This is through the internal policies, practices, and interactions that we have with our wider network and other stakeholder groups. But firstly, let me just introduce myself, give a brief insight into my past experiences, and particularly in sustainability, climate action, and change delivered. Now, if sirens go, don't be alarmed. I live right next to Brixton Police Station, so it's probably just one of those. Okay, so this is me. Here I am standing on the steps of Leeds Town Hall at one of the youth strikes for climate that took place last year. And if I remember correctly, I think I actually missed one of my seminars to attend. But nevertheless, while I wasn't at the youth strikes or helping out at Leeds Climate Commission events, I was studying for a master's in sustainability and consultancy at the University of Leeds. I've recently graduated and left Leeds for London, but having also been an undergraduate geography student at the university, I spent a total of 5 years living in the city. So it was a real honour being asked to be a guest speaker today. The organisations that you can see on the right are those that I have represented, worked for, or had internships with over the past 18 months or so. I've researched behaviour in the health sector, developed the sustainable curriculum programme at the university, and had experience working for Sainsbury's sustainability teams. I'm now currently working for the renewable energy company Bulb. However, I'm not representing Bulb today, and the views described in the presentation are of my own. The ideas presented are based on various sources, such as academic literature and attended, plus my own personal experiences working for a diverse range of private and public academic organisations. So, firstly, what do I mean by a climate-conscious culture? And how would I define a sustainable culture change? In my opinion, a sustainable culture is where pro-environmental actions and values are integrated throughout an entire organisation from top to bottom, whereby the full impact of climate change is valued and demonstrated through sustainable outcomes. A sustainable culture starts from the top. Needs to be embedded at the managerial and board level, where an organisation's performance policies and targets all incorporate sustainability at all levels. Now, this is inspired by green leadership, which is then transmitted to employees throughout the organisation. It's imperative that everyone throughout the organisation has the same level of awareness when it comes to the impact of climate change. However, workplace pro-environmental behaviour is not simple, as it's influenced by various conflicting factors such as efficacy, but it can be achieved if it's made a priority and it has capacity to develop. Now, informational strategies such as training and education can be utilised to increase the awareness and participation of sustainability initiatives, thus resulting in widespread pro-environmental behaviour change. Although there also needs to be available green infrastructure to accommodate active travel, waste management, and energy efficiency behaviours, which are both convenient to adopt. Ensuring the board and workforce are climate conscious are two most important steps in creating a sustainable culture at your organisation. However, it's also important to relay these messages to other stakeholder groups. By engaging our clients about the sustainable processes in our projects and deliverable work, we then create a web of climate consciousness, potentially reaching other stakeholder networks. Furthermore, working with climate conscious suppliers can improve the overall environmental performance of an organisation. Now, to ensure that we're on the right track towards net zero and we're actually responding well to the climate emergency, we need to act as ambassadors within the workplace and beyond to improve the awareness and engagement of climate change within our households and local communities. So these three components, making sustainability a priority, sparking pro-environmental behaviour change, and wider is widespread climate-conscious culture through shared values and collective understanding. Don't get me wrong, it's a daunting task, but the climate action tide is rising, and creating a climate-conscious culture in your organisation is one way to lower your individual footprint, but the footprint of many others too. And the first way to initiate organisational change is to firstly get management. So it's been found that workplace sustainability practices typically start off as localized initiatives, inspired by concerned individuals who aim to make a difference because their climate consciousness also aligns with their personal values. Examples of this I've experienced include the Green Team within the Health Research Authority, who conduct monthly meetings to discuss small-scale projects that inherit a positive environmental impact. And groups like this are commendable. They're probably pretty common for a lot of organizations, but to achieve real change across an entire organization, this momentum needs to be sold internally. That sustainability is considered a priority on the management agenda. I understand that all organizations are different, both by size and structure, yet the steps outlined in this presentation can be applied for any organization, whether large or small, flat or hierarchical. Now, being antecedent, it's really hard to say that word, antecedent and to learn from others is a really important point here. There's no point in reinventing the wheel, but there's more value in adopting similar strategies that have proven to work at other organizations with a similar environment for change. Making climate change an organization is the first step in ensuring sustainability is integrated in the everyday practices of an organization. Environmental policies might require management teams to redefine goals and functions to include an element of climate consciousness, which is then shifting priority away from the short term, but towards a bigger long-term goal. Now, a useful strategy to do this could be to talk in the language of the board. What are the cost savings of being more energy efficient? Or would our agency be more valuable if we're working with sustainable suppliers? Alternatively, in the health sector, by framing the climate crisis as a health crisis, using air quality as a Trojan horse, this enabled climate change to be more relatable for senior management. Now, to ensure that sustainability is included in the priorities and the values of an organization, SMART objectives are a really useful way to clearly outline climate-based targets and goals. And for anyone who's not aware of SMART objectives, they're a project management tool used to set clear aims of a project. Now, having managerial support for sustainability is vital to mitigate the challenges of competing trade-offs, namely the prioritization of other outcomes aside from sustainability. For example, in pro-environmental change management in the health, I realize that patient care and reducing costs will always be considered more important as opposed to decreasing the carbon emissions and overall environmental impact. On the other hand, as witnessed in Newcastle and Manchester NHS Foundation Trust recently, thanks to the endeavours of concerned individuals, once the board understood the value and importance of sustainable outcomes, these hospitals then declared a climate emergency, which then placed climate change in the conversation of any future decisions or policies. So if the board and senior management have an awareness, understanding of environmental impacts, this will shift the priorities from the short term, but to the long term. Now, measuring environmental impact can include various KPIs developed in line with the local issues of that organisation. And some examples of this are the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a really good framework to report on sustainable practices. But you could also use a climate scorecard that can help outline any environmental impact of certain operations and processes. Now, regardless of the organizational size or structure, green leadership at all levels is essential. By communicating with the board and engaging the wider workforce, leadership from senior managers can help inspire organizational change. And a strategic goal to integrate sustainability practices into an entire organization not only needs to be prioritized and made a core organizational value from the top down, but it also needs to be translated to members lower in the organization through bottom-up behavior change. So after gaining top-down support, climate consciousness needs to be transmitted throughout, reaching employees aside from the concerned individuals. And the first step to do this is to educate and train your workforce about the importance of sustainability and the impact of individual action. People firstly need to know the facts of climate change, but I believe that the true value can be gained by demonstrating to teams can make a difference. Informational strategies such as training and education aim to increase employee knowledge, to heighten awareness of environmental problems, but also the impact of their behaviours. Now, it's virtually impossible to ask someone to engage in a new behavior without telling them why to do it, so justifying that behavior, telling them how to do it by providing instructions on how to do that behavior, and telling them when to do it, nudging or prompting them on when to behave pro-environmentally. Now, an example of collective climate training is organised by the Carbon Literacy Project. And this is a really great way to establish a collective understanding of sustainability throughout an organisation. This training course how you're organising carbon literacy. Individuals learn about the realities of climate science in a localised context, but most importantly, they have to pledge to a pro-environmental lifestyle change and encourage others to do similar. The IEMA Corporate Partnership Scheme is also another opportunity to train your workforce about sustainability issues. So ask me later if you want to know more about that too. Improving collective climate events can also be achieved by providing informational feedback on environmental impacts. For example, this could be telling people the difference in carbon emissions from cycling to work as opposed to driving, but then relating this to something that people would understand, such as the amount of energy it takes to boil a cup of coffee. Feedback and environmental cues can be communicated in various different ways, such as physical displays in the form of bulletins or posters. But as we've found most recently, as we're all working remotely, online communication channels can also give climate-conscious feedback, such as reminding people of the environmental impact of attaching a large file to an email. Informational communication, that's a tongue twister, can improve collective understanding, but feedback shouldn't be blaming, but instead be informative and encouraging. So we associate pro-environmental behaviour with a sense of positivity and collective action. Providing information through education, training and feedback isn't solely enough to encourage pro-environmental behaviour within the workplace, whereas the capacity to behave pro-environmentally also needs to be made convenient through available infrastructure. Green infrastructure incurs various localised challenges, but it's important to note that individuals will only behave if there's necessary infrastructure in place. For example, if there's sufficient opportunities to recycle, computer plugs are easily accessible to turn off every night, and if there's available cycle racks so people can cycle to work. Green infrastructure can be expensive, but at first, acknowledging the need to make pro-environmental behaviour convenient is a step towards a climate. In addition, green infrastructure includes elements of technology, so people are given the software so they can conduct online meetings such as today. Incentives are another opportunity to encourage people to behave pro-environmentally, such as vouchers to buy plant-based food or financial incentives for those who don't drive into work. Now, once the collective workforce are aware of the climate change, understand their impact of their actions, this will then increase the participation of local sustainability initiatives, such as nominated sustainability champions or pledging a climate-conscious behaviour change. And I've witnessed some admirable examples of localised sustainability projects that can also have a positive outcome aside from sustainability. For example, environmental volunteering heralds social benefits for the individual and local community. Again, there's challenges with pro-environmental behaviour, from efficacy to structural capacity, and it's not an easy task that can be achieved overnight. However, alongside managerial support and a prioritisation from above, bottom-up pro-environmental behaviour change is essential in embedding sustainability throughout an entire organisation. But it also presents a great opportunity for change outside the walls of our offices and our studios, but to actually make a holistic impact by engaging our wider stakeholders to widespread awareness of climate change and a shared value of sustainability from the top down and bottom up are key steps in generating a climate conscious culture. However, it's important not to downplay the interactions that an organisation has with its external stakeholder groups too. So on the board, you can see a stakeholder matrix. This is a popular tool used by project managers to collate different stakeholder groups determined by their respective power and interest in the project, policy or overall operations. Now, to use a fully fledged matrix research, some materiality analysis, but for the purpose of today's presentation, I've just used assumptions to generate a generic organizational matrix. The presentation's already covered the board, middle managers and interns and graduates. So I want to talk about clients and leaders. Working with climate conscious suppliers can truly influence the overall organizational culture, as environmental performance improves if energy is renewable and waste management companies collect recycling. Examples include procuring sustainable goods from an ethical wholesaler, only having vegetarian food in the canteen, or even having your energy supplied by a 100% renewable electricity provider. And if you want more information about being a bold customer, just give me a message after the presentation. But back on point, if employees are immersed in an environment of sustainable products and processes, they are then more likely to behave with a climate-conscious mindset. Working with sustainable clients is a little trickier, as winning work should always be a priority, as opposed to only working with clients that have a climate consciousness. But a better strategy would be to outline the sustainable processes and outcomes gone into delivering that project, and then present these back to the client as an alternative, more ethical end goal the project has achieved, aside from just delivering on the deliverable. A sustainable methodology could also be sold to clients in the future as a framework of conducting work sustainably, to achieve the end goal while meeting sustainable outcomes. And while competitors don't explicitly impact the internal culture of an organization, I believe that networking and collaborating with competitors can increase the overall value of maintaining a climate conscious culture. It's important not to reinvent the wheel, but to collaborate, share best practice, share knowledge and learn from others from what works best. Now, everyone listening today wants to save the planet and make the world a better place. It's not the time for self-interest, but we need to shake hands and not rub shoulders after COVID-19, of course. Therefore, being part of networking conferences and events like today will go towards creating a climate-conscious culture across the whole industry, not just within an individual organization. Also to engage and participate with other stakeholder groups too, such as local authorities, working with the local communities, but also translating what we're doing in the workplace into the household as well. Climate conscious culture is having shared values throughout the organization, a collective understanding and appreciation of sustainability, and making climate action a priority from the top down and bottom up. This can be demonstrated through climate-focused targets, policies, and outcomes, whereby we train and educate our workforce on being climate conscious. But it also needs to transpire outside of the walls of our offices, whereby we work with sustainable suppliers and clients, and we network with our wider community as well. That brings me to an end and my presentation to a close. Apologies if I've run a little bit over. I could probably talk about this all day. If you have any questions, there's my LinkedIn, my personal and my work email as well. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm happy to answer any questions during the Q&A later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. That was awesome.
No worries. I've just got to work out how to stop sharing my screen now. If I
Yeah,
can.
it should be at the top.
It's at the top of my other desktop. There we go. Sorted.
Now, if you want to make me the host, I'll continue. So click on the right-hand side.
Yeah. Participant, isn't it? More host. I think we're all done, Will.
Yep. Thanks.
Cheers. Nice.
I'll stand down and relax. Just a quick thumbs up from everyone if you thought that was really useful. Good. Nice one. Wow, 2 thumbs up there. So next we have Sarah.
Hello.
Hello. So whilst I'm making you the host, if you want to say hello to the group.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. Thanks very much for that previous presentation, and Will, yourself as well, both sort of really insightful and good way to kick off. So hopefully my presentation is going to build on that a little bit. And now I'm a host, I will give you my screen, hopefully. In a second you'll all see that. Can everyone see that? Yeah, marvelous. I've got a thumbs up, right. I love it when technology works. Okay. So as Will already mentioned, I am an agency owner, and I am feeling an increasing responsibility for the impact and effect my operations have on the planet. As Will's already pointed out, we're all facing huge disruption and uncertainty related to the climate emergency. And because of that, sustainability for me is becoming more of a core consideration in our day-to-day operations. So I'll just give you a, oops. There we go. So a little bit of background to me and Infusion. I started it in 2013, so coming up to 7 years now. First, I started off as an independent consultant, and then over the last few years, it developed more into sort of an agency model. I come from a full service agency background, and I'm just going to move you guys off the screen so you can all see. Perfect. There we go. So yes, I come from a full service agency background. I worked at different agencies across the UK, and I experienced firsthand a lot of the problems that the PR sector is known for. At the time, I just hit 30 and I already felt like I was burning out. So like all foolhardy entrepreneurs, I was sure it could be better another way, and I went out on my own. So as well as building a business during that time and trying to avoid the pitfalls and problems so often associated with our industry, I've also spoken and written at length about disability inclusion and in PR and other factors and elements of inclusion and diversity as well. So, okay. So a few years into agency work, and I want to share really what that sort of looks like at the moment for us. So from the start, the ability to operate from any location was really important, and it was really kind of a fundamental part of how I wanted the agency to work. And when I say flexible, I don't just mean flexible start and finishing times. So come in at 9:30 and finish at 5:30, etc., etc. I mean, we are entirely set up to work either from an office base or remotely. So for us, when COVID-19 hit, the disruption for us was on a logistical front was fairly minimal. We moved into a new office space last year, and the way it was set up was that we could be office-based, but we could just as easily work from home, and a lot of our systems are cloud-based. The technology was in place for that to happen. So yeah, when we moved into that new office space, it was very much a collaborative effort, and that I spoke to the team at length about the ways in which we could operate and the decisions we wanted to take as a business. And that was from everything from the cleaning products to turning equipment off, to how we travelled when we went away to visit clients. We have clients all over the UK, so I actually have a travel kit that's a reusable and sustainable travel kit, and that comes everywhere with me. That has led to a really open book culture with a very clear ethical foundation. We select local suppliers where possible. For example, we're really big fans of Seagulls in Leeds, and they've got a reuse shop that we adore, and we get a lot of our stuff from there for cleaning bottles, food wax, wraps, etc. It's also led us to be more conscious in our community. So in December, we ran a food bank donation campaign in our office estate, in the new estate we just moved into. And that created both a sense of community, and a lot of the businesses on that estate actually contributed donations to us, and we also volunteered our time. We went down and worked in the sorting, the warehouse there. There's a long way to go for us in terms of our own sustainability journey, and some steps are smaller than others, but we are trying to set a good example and a model which hopefully can be replicated. So to take that out into a slightly wider context, that's what I want to talk about this afternoon. Our industry is facing multiple challenges. PR industry is facing multiple challenges. One of our industry bodies, the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, runs a State of the Profession report every year. And last year's came out with the top 11 challenges that you see on your screen at the moment. And these are the sort of issues that are really challenging and presenting problems, and what our profession is worried about at the moment. They cover quite a wide range of topics there, from AI to boardroom representation. But what is missing from this for me is sustainability. And looking at that list, it doesn't look at the moment like it's an obvious priority for PR. So today I'm going to explain why adopting sustainability as a core operating principle can not only overcome some of these big challenges, but make lasting and fundamental shift to a different type of agency model. So I'm going to focus on 3 of the challenges today. I appreciate it's quite a short session. So 3 big ones, I think, really where we can make a difference with a sustainable approach. And those are attracting and retaining talent, representation at boardroom level, and the convergence of the creative disciplines. And to do that, we really need to look at the historical structure of an agency. It has largely remained the same for decades. We are an office-based function, and we have a very clear hierarchical structure and defined job roles. We're known for being highly pressured, stressful, demanding, and flexible when it comes to remote working. And these are all factors that we have an opportunity to change, especially now. And we all know that COVID-19 is catastrophic, but it has given rise to the question of, do we want to go back? For many people, the answer to that is no. And now I think is a time to start figuring out why a sustainable approach is necessary. And as I've said before, it's more than cutting down on waste and switching to who gives a crap plural. It requires us to really question and think about every aspect of our operation. So, for example, is the tech that we use built using minerals from conflict mining? Do we buy everything from Amazon? Sustainability will lead us to examine our long-held practices, and it's going to make changes which have long-term benefits and impacts. So, as I mentioned at the start, diverse talent is is a topic that's really close to my heart. As a deaf individual, I am one of a total of 8% of people in PR that have a disability. It is overwhelmingly white and middle class. It's got a very high proportion of privately educated people with university degrees. And similarly, our lack of flexible working options make returning to work after children and progressing to senior positions quite difficult. And whilst there is a fantastic wealth of talent in Leeds, the creative and communications industry here draws from a talent pool that really goes across the Leeds city region and across most of, sort of Yorkshire and West Yorkshire, and even across the Pennines into Manchester. But for all of us, I think we understand too well the issues around commuting in the north. Economically, environmentally, mentally, it does take its toll. And again, I don't want to dwell on current events too much, but the situation that we're in at the moment has exposed many of the myths that are perpetuated by our sector and by agency heads about the possibilities of remote and sort of flexible working. I do think it's going to be difficult for agency heads to go back to that kind of very rigid approach, and I think this is now where we will begin to see a very different sort of agency shape sort of form. So in terms specifically of sustainability, we have an opportunity to open up PR roles to more home-based workers because of this. So disabled people, those with caring responsibilities, those based in a much wider geographical circle, for example, they don't have to be in this area. We can draw from a wider pool. If you look at reducing emissions related to commuting and being office-based, you can open yourself up to better staff retention, increase talent pool and improve creative output from a very diverse group of minds. Okay, and that ties in a little bit to the next challenge that I wanted to talk about today. So representation at board level has been a persistent problem for frustration rather for the PR industry. For a long time, PR has been very much handed down to. PR is a thing you do at the end and you push it out, and I think now there's a lot of pushback from industry that we need to be those strategic advisors sitting at the table. So how can we do that, and how does sustainability fit into that? I think if we look at purpose, it was a really big buzzword to emerge from 2019. It remains really popular today. So quite often you'll hear purpose, people and profit, and that's featured in a lot of PR sort of think pieces over the last year or two. Through helping senior business leaders identify and communicate purpose, it's often linked back to the product and service rather than the wider goals of the organisation. So through sustainability, I think agencies have the opportunity to offer that strategic guidance at board level. Resilience is particularly topical at the moment, and climate resilience specifically so. And the effect on business operations is thorough, right from supply chains to pressure from stakeholders to demonstrate how you are operating both ethically and sustainably. And those agencies who can adopt and show a deeper understanding of sustainability and its impacts are going to become far more indispensable to that senior boardroom level. In a similar way to how companies, including people like Hewlett-Packard, now ask pitching agencies for their diversity credentials, I think we're going to see far more corporations seek out agencies who have the knowledge and ability to steer and advise on climate resilience and the sustainability agenda. So I think we're going to see a request for our own sustainability agendas in there. So what are we doing as agencies? How are we looking at our impact? How have we taken sustainability to heart in our day-to-day operations? And I suspect that's going to come into play over the next year or two. So the final challenge that I want to address today is the PR's convergence with other disciplines. So over the last few years, and I've noticed this personally as well from when I first started working in the industry back in the early 2000s, the lines between sort of PR, marketing, SEO, even design and paid advertising are extremely blurred these days. The PR skill set has never been more varied or comprehensive. But that has brought concerns with it, that it's going to be absorbed into a wider marketing function, and PR will become just a little bit of what marketers do. And I think, again, sustainability has a role to play in keeping us front and centre in that. Because a huge factor in the adoption of sustainability is the communication around it and how it's communicated to stakeholders. And this is PR's domain. There's challenges around transparency, relevancy, shifting public habits, and it's communication skills that are going to be poised to take the lead on that. And again, so agencies with a sustainability as a central pillar are going to be at an advantage. We excel at social listening. We are well versed in shifting public perception. Sustainability is an opportunity for us to lead and collaborate, not converge and disappear. From combating fake news, for example, to talking about emergency energy tech innovations, there's an opportunity here for agencies to drive sustainability communications and reach all stakeholders. However, I do want to add a caveat into that, because I do believe that in order to be successful at that, we must embody sustainability practices ourselves. We need to really get it. Sustainability comms has to come from a foundation of sustainability practice. Okay, just to finish up here, to become the change makers and find ways to overcome the challenges revealed by the CIPR survey right at the start of the presentation, we first need to start with our own agencies. We need to break down those rigid structures, how we work, where we work, the skills and our approach. We need to bring sustainability into the heart of an agency, and only that way can we develop a model that is responsive, adapted and resilient. And those are traits that are going to be instrumental in helping agencies thrive in a new world. And that is all from me. So thank you very much for your time. I'm just going to stop my share. There we go. And I'm going to make Will the host again.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was really, really insightful, really good. I actually have a question for you later that I've noted down. It was really interesting actually when you said how businesses are going to start pitching companies about their sustainability credentials. I think that is the way things are going to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think they will, because we, interestingly, and I appreciate, I don't want to take up too much time, but we actually had a client of ours request that from us. So it's starting to happen, I think.
Starting, yeah. So I'd better act. Okay, now I'm moving on to Ben, who is our next expert speaker. If you can hear us, Ben.
I can, yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, there you are. Very green. I like it. Very on brand.
It's good, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. I'm going to make you the host now, so you can then start sharing your screen and go with proceed with your presentation.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks, Will. And good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Ben Tongue. I'm a 20-year or so career sustainability professional. I did a good length job at the University of Bradford as environmental manager there and delivered all sorts of really great incremental sustainability improvement measures, BREEAM outstanding buildings and loads of stuff around green waste and travel and biodiversity and things like that. I'm now working in sustainable technology at NHS Digital. But I think really what I've come along to say today is primarily around framing. So it's my strong feeling that we need to build a new framing for our narrative around sustainability. And really, I suppose, question the word sustainability, So I'm going to dive straight into my slides now. 2 seconds while I just load them up. Here we go. Okay, so this is my proposition, the Brundtland definition. I'm assuming that most of you have heard of this before, the classic definition for sustainability. But really, I mean, I don't know what you think, but do you think we can say we've been anywhere close to delivering against this task? I think sadly not. I mean, in my opinion, but I should stress this presentation is all my own views, so this doesn't represent any of my employers. But the climate and ecological emergency is going to be the defining issue of our times. I read in Mike Berners-Lee's books, he tells a story about if aliens landed on Earth and saw the graph of ever rising annual global carbon emissions, they'd have no idea that the human race have understood about the dangers of global warming for centuries and trying to actively manage it for decades. It's quite easy to say from that perspective that so far sustainability has failed largely, and the world needs brave leaders now to stand up and ask the difficult questions that haven't been solved so far to really create some meaningful change in the right direction. 2019 had the highest ever carbon emissions, and that was after the big climate emergency had been declared and the big global awakening around the subject. This feels like ages ago now, doesn't it? The Australian wildfires, it was only a few months ago. But you know, it absolutely terrifies me. It's the result of 1.1 degrees of warming above pre-industrial averages. And it's a glimpse into our future. But it's a future our kids are going to face every day. I think everyone's in denial, no matter how much you're aware of this topic, everyone's in denial about the scale of the change and the danger that's coming. If you look at the IPCC reports, we've got less than 10 years left before we use up at current emissions levels, before we use up the safe carbon budget. So one shot, the next 10 years are going to have a defining impact on the following 10,000. So we're standing on the edge of a precipice fundamentally. And this is what the current trajectory looks like. So the Paris Agreement might not be quite this bad, but no one's even hitting those targets. So the current trajectory for 2100, if you look at the science, is somewhere in the region of a 4-degree world, and this is what it looks like. Essentially, the brown and yellow areas are lost to desertification, so become uninhabitable, and the green areas are habitable. Western Antarctica becomes prime real estate. The red areas are lost to sea level rise. You look at our country in green there, we look like we're sitting pretty. But what this doesn't necessarily automatically show is that most of the world's food growing regions are in those yellow areas. So how are we going to feed ourselves? What's going to happen to all the migration if geopolitical forces even allow it to happen? When I look at this map, I see chaos, starvation, war, famine. it's not a pretty picture. And this is what we need to avoid. And it's only through really kind of absorbing this kind of material that you can really start to prioritize sustainability properly. It's got to be up there as an absolutely core thing. It can't be less important than any other thing that we're trying to do. So, and I currently work within the health system, and this narrative is really useful for me. So climate breakdown is a public health issue. It's a very useful way of talking about it. It also makes it very personal for people on an individual basis. So air pollution is the first way that it's affected most people in this country. It affects every organ and most cells in the human body. COVID has caused a big reduction, obviously. You've got floods in there as well from a digital, I work in digital, so from a digital service perspective, energy security around floodings, really crucial. I saw a really interesting case study on the Lancaster 2015 floods where substation went out, and even simple things like doors just automatically locked shut. You could only communicate if you had an old-fashioned phone that plugged into the wall. You've got heat, obviously, global warming. But pandemic rise is significant as well. So we're in a pandemic. This is a great time to start talking about this kind of stuff. But the one that keeps me awake at night is food and water and forced migration. So, you know, how are we going to deal with that? That civil unrest kind of area is really, really terrifying. So this is a really interesting piece of writing from Arup. I don't know if any of you have seen it already. I can't remember the title of it, but it's basically 4 scenarios for 2050. You could search it online. And basically they have a look at what's going to go on with planetary health and what's going to go on with society. And they create 4 societies, post-Anthropocene being the best, a really good kind of social society, and going green at the same time. And then if you move left along that axis, you get more into social control. So greentocracy was saving the planet, but having to put massive restrictions in place to do it. So, you know, there's huge dangers at the moment. How are we going to manage sustainability in the face of rising populism, in the face of economic stagnation due to COVID? You know, are we actually finally going to get to properly question the current economic system? I think is a really big question. This is the kind of conversation that we need to be having, isn't it? It's looking at these different potential futures for society and being able to really kind of internalize these and start to think about which ones we want. What are we willing to do now to have it? The COVID experience that we're all going through, my big sympathies go out to anyone who's being seriously affected personally by it. But has really shown some great outcomes of that is that people are really willing to look at social distancing, really willing to kind of make some big steps for the good of society. And I think that we can learn from that, because that's often been a big issue within the sustainability sector to, sorry, excuse my cat, that people won't want to have, you know, stop flying or whatever, because that's their right. So it's definitely something to think about. Will sent me this earlier. I like it. I was going to use that graph we put in, but you got it first. So yeah, you know, COVID is the window for change is open. You know, what's the biggest system change that we can drive out of this experience? I think it's a really, really crucial question. I'm doing some thinking about it at NHS Digital, and in terms of the health sector, there's been a huge response from it in terms of getting the digital systems up to speed. Look at what it's done to primary care. It's absolutely exploded, telehealth, etc. And almost all doctor's appointments are suddenly happening online. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's all kinds of stuff we can change. So COVID has come from bats, right? Bats into pangolins, into humans through wet markets. So, and the theory is that it's because we're squeezing bat habitats. So COVID is actually, it's a direct impact of the ecological emergency, the twin of the climate emergency. So, you know, how can we start to use systems which affect our local, have less ecological impact is a crucial question. In my role in digital, I think that's an interesting one, because we think about energy use of digital systems, but not really so much where they're mined, the kind of ecological damage that does in those localities, the waste, all that kind of stuff gets a bit lost. If you want to interested in listening to a bit of an exploration of the possibilities of good and bad of coronavirus, I'd recommend there's a lecture by a guy called Charles Eisenstein online. It's called Coronation, and he's recorded it. It's like a good way to spend an hour of your time, I found, listening to it all, because it's a crucial decision point that we're at the moment globally. And now I'm just going to dive a little bit into my topic. So as I said, I work in sustainable technology. I want to look a little bit at the interface of sustainability or resilience and technology. So the sustainability impact of digital systems are largely hidden, but you might have seen some headlines around Bitcoin has the same energy impact as a small country, Denmark, Ireland, amazingly. Home streaming, it's only in the last few months that it's really become obvious in terms of the media that home streaming TV actually has a really high impact. So one study I saw puts home streaming has an HD movie has a higher carbon impact than going to the cinema. Surprisingly, that seemed counterintuitive the first time I read it. There's big risks as well, isn't there? I've heard critical raw materials mentioned already. What about the fourth industrial revolution? Things like some of the dangers of AI, algorithmic bias, all that kind of thing. There's a whole kind of wealth of different things that we need to be thinking about in here. But it's a really big issue with the amount of data that's flowing grows exponentially. It doubles every 18 months in the world. So every 18 months, we've got twice as much data as we ever created before in human history. We've got an event later this week on Thursday afternoon as part of the Leeds Digital Festival, really taking a deep dive into what can digital and tech do for societal resilience to the challenges that we're facing. So if this has whetted your appetite at all for that, then please come along to that one as well. So, and then in terms of creating a sustainable digital service, we're doing some really interesting work. I'm partnering quite tightly with DEFRA in government. And so the first thing is, of course, you've got to look for net gain. So we're looking at how can you create low impact ICT infrastructural systems and create high enabled savings, so reductions in travel or space requirements or things like that. So a digital service actually creates a net sustainability benefit. We've really got to think carefully, especially in public sector, and I know a lot of you aren't, but for what we're going to buy, the power of buying the right things is absolutely crucial, and is a massive driver for things like circular economy and ethics in the supply chain as well, making sure we're not causing other people really bad things upstream. We need to go well beyond carbon. So that carbon's the classic discussion at the moment. We need to think about embodied energy, materials, ethics, like I said. So a nice little fact, for most user devices, like a phone or computer or whatever, roughly 80% of the energy is embodied, of the life cycle energy is embodied within the manufacturing process. So if an average phone only gets used for a couple of years, but if you can give it to someone for an extra lifetime, then you half that embodied energy per use. So it's really important to make sure we're thinking about the right things here. Responsible digital citizens. Every email that you keep causes something like, I think it's about 10 grams of carbon per year, even if it doesn't have any attachments. So I've got an ancient Hotmail account, and I realized that it gets tons of spam. And I realized I had about 30,000 unread spam messages in there. And I was causing a huge unknown carbon footprint from that. So how are we making sure we are reducing our footprint? Can you choose standard definition TV instead of high definition, that kind of thing? It's just about being aware of this impact, because it's so hidden in terms of digital services. A really interesting one for me is how can we get this to leverage community as well? So another thing that's come out of COVID is how much people are wanting to help each other. So how can we create digital services which enable people to do that? And then the last one there, I can't see it because I've got that. So yeah, climate breakdown resilience. So how are we going to be able to design in resilience against those public health impacts, which I touched on earlier? So there you go. I'd be happy to go into that with more detail if anyone wanted to at some point after the session. But there's a little sketch out of what I'm looking at. And I just wanted to finish really, you know, with our favourite environmental activist. Change is coming whether you like it or not. This coming back to the framing, this for me, this is a real framing exercise, and we just have to be thinking, you know, we're trying to enable society to thrive here and not come to a disastrous end. So revisiting the question of the whole session, can digital agencies save the planet? I think everyone has an input here, but it's about really realizing how an important issue this is, and then really thinking about what levers that you've got to pull and how hard can you pull them, and that's the only point that we're going to make a real difference. And the little quote that I like that sums this up, I think, is bad things will happen if good people do nothing. So there we go. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. That was fantastic. Very insightful and very scary in a way, but we need to feel some fear. So yeah, I would be interested in finding out what the impact of this Zoom call is then, you know, after you've said that.
Yeah, I'll do some research actually. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. Because
yeah, like I said at the start, I am assuming this is more sustainable than us all going to, you know, the centre of Leeds to do it face to face. But like you said, it might not be the case. So interesting. And Ben, if you want to share a link to your event in the chat, please do, and you know, invite the people here.
Yeah, I'll pop it on there. Thanks, Will.
Great.
You might have to tell me what I need to do now. I did watch the instructions, but I've forgotten.
There's a chat button at the bottom, little speech bubble. You can click on that and then.
Oh no! In terms of unshare, in terms of giving.
Oh, I see. So on the right-hand side panel, you should see all participants. If you don't see that, there's a little icon in the bottom which looks like two little people called participants. If you click on that, that should bring up a side panel on the right-hand side.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if you find me, and then click on more.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you very much, Ben. That was really, really good, as always. Okay, right. Now on to Fiona, talking about tech for good and using it, embedding it into our everyday lives. So good to have you here, Fiona. I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm Fiona Bradley of FB Comms. I'll share my screen. So my topic is technology for change, or really technology as an enabler for sustainability. So technology and marketing have been given a bit of a bad reputation for our role in consumerism, but these platforms have just as much power to be harnessed for good. So I work with the loyalty people who provide loyalty program solutions for the likes of Benefit Cosmetics and Molton Brown. My main focus is Earth Rewards, who are an environmental tech startup who are helping prevent deforestation of the Amazon. So I understand that in the modern world, it's near impossible to have a negligible environmental impact. So I'm using the marketing tools at my disposal to help people make small sustainable changes and offset the things that they can't reduce, like a daily commute, through the Earth Rewards app. Sustainability isn't yet a legal requirement, but it is becoming essential for commercial viability, really, whether that's your own agency or your client's business, because it's top of mind. Consumers know it's a problem. They're trying to make a change, but they don't know the solution. And often the blocker to being a sustainable person is the idea that you need to become a vegan, quit aerosol usage, and join Extinction Rebellion, which you don't have to do, but it helps. We are looking for the solution, and it's showing up in terms of how we're applying for jobs and services, with 40%, including myself, taking on a role because of their sustainability policy. And employees are more likely to stay. Ultimately, sustainability is good for the bottom line. People are more willing to choose and pay more for a sustainable service. You'd never pay £5 for a bath bomb at Superdrug, but you would at Lush because you trust in their strong sustainability policy that is well and rooted throughout all their branding. Consumers want brands to help them be more sustainably and environmentally friendly, but they don't think that companies are doing enough at the minute. The way we shop and consume is changing, especially through the pandemic, when we're realizing that we can live with less. We don't need that, or making a sustainable purchase because it's got less wastage and it's long-term cost effective, really. And if organizations and services don't step up, then we're going to divest. So this relates to technology, in that technology birthed e-commerce, which is our best friend or worst enemy right now. I can one tap purchase whatever I feel like for next day prime delivery just by looking at my phone screen. I don't even take a purse out when I leave the house anymore, just my phone. I use Apple Pay for everything. So naturally we're buying even more because nobody has to know your shopping habits, and you can always send half of it back. Naturally, as we consume more, we own more, it becomes more disposable, with fast fashion driving quality and cost of clothing down. The £140 million worth of waste, that's just in the UK. As marketers, we use technology to mine data, to engage and reach customers and to drive sales, but there are so many ways that we can do this responsibly. There are companies out there that are already using technology to creatively solve the climate crisis. So there's Ecosia that I really like. It's a search engine. Trees are planted. This is funded through the paid search. There's Coin Rewards, a banking app. You get a 3% kickback whenever you spend with their sustainable retail partners. And there's Earth Rewards that I mentioned earlier. It's a mobile application. You measure your carbon footprint and earn Earth Rewards that are an environmental currency that fund deforestation prevention project in the Amazon. This is through carbon offsetting. Companies like Gucci, Amazon, BP and BMW are all going carbon neutral through this kind of carbon offsetting as well. We have, as an agency, 3 roles to play in sustainability that Will touched on earlier, as a company, as a marketer, and as an individual. The first thing you can do as a company is to use the tech. So don't just recycle your office waste, but there's things like Spock and Facebook Marketplace appearing as intermediaries. Recycle your desktop, your desk, your chairs, anything like that. Use the trends also. Can you integrate plastic-free or meat-free Mondays into your working life? Now there's platforms like Facebook events you can use for clothing swaps, kids fancy dress swaps, saving on your textiles emissions and money. Things like Google Sheets and Smart Sheets, use them creatively for things like carpooling, just to save on people's travel emissions if possible. There's always the option to become a B Corp, which is a good stamp of your social and environmental performance. Other B Corps include Ben & Jerry's and Patagonia. It's a certification that just needs a reassessment every couple of years. And really glad Sarah picked up on this, flexi working, because when an employee is traveling to, from or for work, those emissions are part of the company's carbon footprint rather than their own. So Earth Rewards is completely remote working to practice what we preach and save our own carbon footprint. And hopefully, more companies that previously didn't have a flexible working model are now realizing with the tech like Zoom, Trello, and Google Docs that people can work from home if they need to. Sorry if I'm going against Ben, that would actually incur more carbon footprint than if they were sat in an office. But hopefully the business model will change after the pandemic. As a marketer, we face a challenge of balancing our values of sustainability with a client's need to sell more stuff and make more money. And clients tend to lead with a sales strategy, which is, here's the thing, buy it now, short-term profits. We want to lead with a marketing strategy, which is, here's my story, here's a relationship, feeding into loyalty and longer term profits. But we need to start leading with a sustainability strategy, which is here's a relationship, here's the product, but also here's the extra environmental or social benefit that you get from going with my agency or my client over the competitors. You can get really creative with what that could be. Then there's the content we create. So we have platforms to share socially responsible messaging that's ultimately good for our brand and it's good for our client's brand. Jump on things like Water Day, Earth Day, National Wildlife Day. What's your company doing? Do you have a cycle to work scheme? Share to inspire others to do the same. The sustainability partnerships that James touched on as well. So you can start recommending that your clients work with or support sustainable causes. They can apply for a B Corp certification themselves or actively seek out sustainable clients. When I'm looking for retail partners for Earth Rewards, I need them to represent the Earth Rewards brand. I'm not going to go to Jaguar or Emirates. I'm looking for people that are already making headway with their sustainability policy. Then as an individual, we've all got an impact. The first thing that you can do is to become aware of your impact. Do you even know the effect that you have on the environment around you? Use a carbon footprint calculator or calculate your food miles or your textiles emissions. Then you can realize where you need to start reducing or where you can reduce. As I mentioned before, harness your own social platforms. So start following sustainable content creators and leaders in those kinds of fields of tech to get inspired. Even events like this and the one that Ben's running on Thursday, just to get even more ideas of what you can do and what's out there. The one that I think is the most important is conscious consumption. So we've just come out of Fashion Revolution Week, which was a campaign that's asking retailers to be more transparent about their impacts and asking consumers to start quizzing retailers on who made their clothes. The research is literally at your fingertips. So where was my dress made? Is my dinner factory farmed? Is there a zero waste shop nearby we could use? I know there's a few in Leeds actually, near the Corn Exchange. Is there a more sustainable way that you can do things like growing your own veg or even making your own pet snacks? Finally, I've got some recommended reading. So these are books that I found really useful in understanding why sustainability is fundamental. Sapiens was actually one of the best non-fiction books that I've read so far this year, I think. We'll be sharing all the slides afterwards if you don't note those down. Thank you for having me. Those are the QR codes for the Earth Rewards app. There's my email if you have any more questions afterwards. Thank you for having me. Stop sharing.
Thank you very much for that, Fiona. That was very insightful. One thing that I thought of whilst you were talking about, like sustainable fashion and such, is this quote that I heard recently: "The most sustainable item of clothing that you can have is the one that you already own." So I'd be interested in how we can encourage technology to reduce our consumption as well as just shift it to a slightly less impactful way.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's one for the discussions later.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you very much. Now over to Rob. He's still with us.
Well,
How are you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, see you.
Good. Yeah, very good. I'm going to make you the host so you can share your screen and start your presentation. Thank you.
All right, grand. Okay. I shall get my screen sorted. I can. Coming through. Right, are we there? Yeah. Okay. All right. Everyone hear me okay? Yeah, I'm Rob. I am from an organisation called Social Business Brokers, and what I was going to do for the next few minutes was just tell you a bit about what we do, particularly work that we're doing in Leeds with a project called Zero Waste Leeds, and then a project that we've been part of that is called Leeds by Example. And I was keen just to give a few kind of practical examples of things that we're you know, when we work with organisations that we are, you know, keen for people to explore. And then hopefully, you know, we can look at some kind of specific things for people in your sector as well. So yeah, Social Business Brokers, we've been going for 10 years now. Basically, the brokers bit is about trying to bring people together to tackle social problems. I think the thing we think is that, there's no end of complex social problems that we need to be tackling, and we need a range of different people and organisations kind of working on that. And what we find really interesting is when you can bring, you know, social enterprises, local businesses, local council, local communities together to try to solve problems. And one of the things we've been working on for the last couple of years is a project called Zero Waste Leeds. And basically the idea behind that is to look at building a movement in the city to help the city become zero waste by 2030. You know, I'll be totally frank, we don't know what that means by 2030 yet in terms of zero waste, but again, we want to kind of work with a range of different people and organisations to try to find ways to do that. And then some of the things we've been doing, we've as was mentioned before, that we've got a project around fashion, that we had a zero waste fashion week last week where we were looking at the environmental impacts of our clothing choices. We've been doing some work with local running clubs as well on the environmental impacts of races organised by clubs, you know, things like water bottles and that kind of thing. And then we've got a project that we just started recently, looking at how we could encourage more school uniform reuse. So again, you know, that's quite a good example of where you can get an environmental impact, but also clearly a kind of a social impact as well in terms of getting more kind of affordable uniforms to people who need them kind of most. But yeah, like all of you, I think, I mean, our work just totally changed 6 weeks ago. And we'd had quite a big focus on what's called on-the-go recycling, kind of recycling when we're out and about. And clearly we're not out and about as much at the moment. And we've been working alongside the council, looking at how we can all manage our waste whilst we're at home. The council approached us to see if we could work with them, because as you would expect, we've all been producing a lot more waste over the past few weeks because we're all at home. Apparently waste in Leeds has gone up by 20%, household waste. So we've been working alongside the council to just let people know about ways they can manage their waste at home. So we tried our best. We didn't have a great deal of money, but to try to get quite a high impact campaign to reach as many people as we can. And we've basically just been talking with people about, you know, how you can keep recycling. If you're out and about with your dog, please take your dog poo bags home. I've spoken so much about dog poo over the past 4 or 5 weeks, you would not believe, but it's quite a big kind of issue. And then things like composting. This has been a big one as well. Obviously, people can't take their stuff to charity shops because they're all closed, so asking people to keep hold of that, of their clothes. And we've been working with local designers to get people thinking about, you know, repair and that kind of stuff of their clothing. So that's a bit of a background in terms of what we do. The project that we're mostly known for, that we've been part of, is a project called Leeds by Example, which hopefully those of you who are in Leeds will have been aware of, led by Hubbub. You'll hear from Jess in a few minutes, and its focus for the first 12 months was about on-the-go recycling. So if you're in Leeds, you've hopefully seen the orange and yellow bins in the city centre to help you to recycle your plastic bottles, your drinks cans, and your coffee cups. And we were basically the local partner on that project, so we did lots of kind of local promotion and that kind of stuff on that campaign, and it's had quite a big impact in the city centre in terms of making it a lot easier for people to recycle whilst they're out and about. But I think the thing that's particularly relevant here is that the project has become a kind of locally owned project now, that the council is leading on. And as has been discussed already, the council declared a climate emergency last year, and one of the ways that the council is trying to work with local organisations and local people on how we actually respond to the climate emergency is by taking the Leeds by Example idea and expanding it from its original focus on on-the-go recycling to include a wider range of kind of pro-environmental behaviours, both for individuals in the city and businesses and organisations. And I suppose that's the kind of bit that's relevant to today, really, in that, just as I say, we were literally just about to start a piece of work when you know, we all had to start working from home and things, about working with businesses in the city to look at some practical ways that we can kind of manage our environmental impact as businesses. So what I wanted to do was just take you quickly through a few of the things that we were about to start talking to people about, and then obviously, if there are businesses kind of represented here who would like to explore in more detail, we can chat more to see if we can do some more of this. So I think the first thing to say, and it's been picked up already a few times really, and that none of us, you know, underestimate how awful and difficult the current situation is. However, there will also be a time when we're all starting to go back to our kind of businesses and our organisations, and there is an opportunity to kind of to think, well, how can we do things differently, and what are the things that we've learned over the past kind of weeks and it'll be months, you know, that we can actually kind of change how we you know, act as individuals and work as organisations. So I think, you know, we're keen to see how we can work with people at that time. And as I say, the things that we work through with people, if they're looking at the environmental impact of their organisation, is first of all to just think about who has got responsibility for the different things. We often get approached by someone in an organisation who's an environmental champion, perhaps. And the first thing we do is just to try to work out who are the different people who've got responsibility. So it might be, if it's a bigger organisation, it might be someone at head office, someone in sustainability. There might be the building manager, you know, is important, the landlord, whoever it might be. Try to work out, first of all, who are the different people who have got responsibility, because that matters in terms of things like working out how you can improve your recycling, for example. And then again, one of the things we really try to work with people is to engage your staff as much as you can in all of this. Again, the real positive and why we're so interested in movement building is that there is no end of people who are interested in this stuff. And I think if you can engage your staff and work with the people who will actually be really keen on working out how you can be a more sustainable kind of organisation, I think that can be a really good starting point. And then clearly, as I say, that there's about a dozen different things we work through with people, but one of them that clearly comes up is you know, is an important one is recycling. And again, that's why we kind of say it's important to try and work out who's got responsibility, because it can be one where time and again people come to us and they say, I've put some recycling bins in our office and nobody's using them, and I've heard that it actually just gets thrown in, you know, with all the other rubbish and things like that. And it often the thing we need to do is to try to understand well, what is, who does collect your waste? What is the land, what's the relationship that the landlord has got with a waste contractor and that kind of thing, and work out some of the practicalities kind of behind that, and then work with your staff over time to get them to be recycling as best they can in their office. And it would be remiss of me to not kind of encourage people in Leeds at least to recycle whilst they're out and about. So if you're in the city centre, when we're back there in a few weeks' time, one good thing is that it is nice and easy to recycle things like food and drink packaging whilst you're out and about. So we kind of talk to people about that. And then another kind of impact that is one of the big ones for a lot of organisations, I think Will mentioned, a culture of pizza and beer and things like that. But I think it's interesting to think of ways that, in terms of how we cater for events when we're back to doing that. There are opportunities in terms of going to default vegetarian and vegan kind of food, and then thinking of things. I mean, the picture there. Often there are buffets where there's just a tremendous amount of waste, and there are ways to cater for events, internal and external, which do kind of reduce the environmental impacts of your choices. And then the kind of final one here, which again I suppose is the most interesting one really at the moment, in that when I was putting this presentation together 6 weeks ago, the idea of doing this kind of thing rather than all coming into town and some of us driving in or whatever, that seemed a bit ridiculous really. But I think the last few weeks have shown us that there are opportunities to reduce workplace travel, and clearly that is one of the big impacts, I think, in terms of broader environmental impacts. I think it's 20% of the carbon emissions are from transport. If you were to look at things for your organisation, transport will clearly, for a lot of us, will be quite a big one. So that's one that we will clearly be working with people to not go back into old habits of thinking, right, we need to travel to all of our meetings. So there were just a few of the things that we worked through with people. I mean, in terms of opportunities for your sector, I mean, as I said, there's quite a few things that that I've talked about kind of there. But I suppose one thing that we're really interested in is that the people who are in on this meeting, there'll be a tremendous kind of range and kind of breadth of skills that I think at a time when we have got we've obviously got the current real challenge that we've got, but we've got the much bigger challenge of kind of tackling climate change kind of longer term as well. There will be so many skills, whether that's around marketing or whatever, that can be of real benefit to, and not just to organisations like ourselves, but to lots of other organisations as well, about using those skills for kind of the benefit of, to move things forward a bit, really. I think a second kind of one that I'd be keen to explore, and again, it's come out as you would expect already, is about the kind of work with your clients and thinking about how you can engage them in all of this stuff, but also kind of influence them a little bit, and then also help them to get their heads around, well, what does it mean to be whatever the business they are in a world where we need to be kind of responding to the climate emergency. So that's the second one there. Again, I think the other one is about that there's something about when, in a few weeks' time, whenever it is, when things start going back to normal a little bit, taking a bit of a lead as an organisation about thinking, well, what is that new? Are there opportunities for a new low carbon way of working, and maybe be kind of leaders in your sector to explore some of that kind of stuff. And then a final one, which I wouldn't, underestimate the importance of, really, is about, if you've got some time to think about using your skills kind of either within work time or outside of work time to kind of volunteer your expertise with, if you're Leeds based, there's no end of really interesting organisations and community initiatives involved in this kind of stuff that would be really that would really welcome your skills and expertise. And then I think this is the kind of my final point really about. I think Will mentioned this right at the start, and a couple of I think James mentioned it as well, that I think there's real potential to look at how you work in your kind of in your sector and your sectors kind of work together on this stuff. I think there is just a really good I think there's kind of real opportunities not to necessarily be competing on this kind of stuff, but to think how can we all work together to kind of to engage more in terms of issues around the climate emergency. And I think that was my final kind of point. There is, if anyone's interested, if you look for Leeds by Example on LinkedIn, you'll find that we've got a LinkedIn network there, and we've been running kind of breakfast meetings every couple of months that I'll make sure that people find out about that through Will if you'd be interested in that. And yeah, there's our kind of information about us if you're interested in what we do. Zero Waste Leeds on all social media. All right, thank you very much. Shall I pass back, Will?
Yep, thank you, Rob. That was really good. I like how there are so many different aspects, which means that there's so many opportunities for people who have different skills and interests in different areas to really apply those skills. So yeah, that final slide you put up there with how we can best work together is that, is just that. We don't need to tackle it completely on our own and try and do everything. So yeah, really good to hear your presentation there. Thank you.
You just need to remind me how to pass back now. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. At the bottom there should be a participants icon. If you click on that.
No, yeah.
That should bring. Yep. If you find me, click the more button.
Yep.
And then make host.
Find you, participants. Sorry.
Yep.
Everybody. Find you, more, make host. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now over to Jess. I'm sure she's been waiting patiently, wanting to pounce and do her thing.
Hi. Yeah, should I share my screen?
Yep, you are now the host, so over to Jess. Thank you.
Okay. Can everybody see that? Yeah, perfect. Thanks for the thumbs up. Amazing, thanks for having me. Really interesting presentations. I'm enjoying watching everyone. So I work with Hubbub. So we're an environmental charity. We're actually based in London. I guess some people have described us a bit more as a kind of comms agency. We're officially a charity, but we're a bit hard to sort of pigeonhole. We do quite a lot of different campaigns around different environmental issues. So I'm just going to talk you through kind of our approach really, and then give you a few case study examples to hopefully kind of bring that to life, and just some ideas really for how you can communicate environmental issues, whether that's to your sort of teams, your staff, or your clients or the public. Is just one example of the approach that we've taken. So our purpose is to inspire ways of living that are good for the environment. That's our main aim, and our vision is a world where everyone is an environmentalist, and that's whether they realise it or not. So on that basis, we don't always lead necessarily with an environmental issue. We tend to try and focus on the things that relate to people's everyday lives. So that might be the food that they eat, their clothes, their homes, or where they live. So really finding things that kind of resonate with them. So we might lead more on them sort of saving money or doing something social or fun that they're kind of already interested in. Rob's already mentioned the Leeds by Example campaign. So yeah, that was our first sort of why I'm here today, is partly is we've worked quite a lot in Leeds. So this was a big collaborative campaign, as Rob mentioned, and some of you said you'd seen the bins around town. So just to try and transform recycling on the go was the aim of the campaign, and it's been amazing how that's naturally evolved, with loads of different people in Leeds being involved to talk about the wider climate emergency. And so I put the link in the chat there, but the Leeds by Example website, it says leedsbyexample.co.uk, really tries to kind of give some of that context, that Leeds has declared a climate emergency, but what are sort of practical steps that you can take primarily as an individual in your own lives to try and reduce your own personal impact as well. So there's also links to the WWF carbon footprint calculator is quite a good place to start. So it'd be amazing if that's something that you could sort of share with your contacts as well. So we've worked quite a lot in Leeds basically so far. So this is just the approach that we take to campaigns. I mean, we work on quite a broad range of different environmental issues. So from food, fashion, homes, and also sort of the neighbourhoods, and lots around sort of littering and waste. So each issue is quite new, so we don't claim to be kind of experts in each one. So hopefully this is sort of familiar in terms of a kind of design thinking type approach. Is effectively, initially we try to really get to grips with an issue, understand what it's about. So from background research, we do quite a lot of different surveys maybe, or polling, observations. So along with Rob, I spent quite a bit of time stood on the streets in Leeds watching people use bins, and it's a fascinating activity. You learn a lot, mainly that people don't look at them before they put stuff in there, and so things need to be bright and bold and catch people's attention. So once we've got that kind of insight, we try to collaborate with different groups. We're quite a small team based in London, and we're generally funded by larger businesses, but we work with a whole range of different people, anyone that's up for doing something really, from councils to community groups. So the Leeds by Example campaign, for example, is funded by 26 major brands, retailers and manufacturers. So then once we've got those kind of partnerships on board as well, we try and design different approaches really to try and change that behaviour. So whatever the environmental issue is that we're trying to tackle, what will really help to catch people's attention, to sort of light a spark of awareness, maybe change their behaviour at a point of action. So do they just need a brighter bin or a round sort of aperture to nudge them towards using it? Or is it something about creating a lasting legacy to really sort of make a longer term change? So then we always try and experiment with these different approaches, not necessarily knowing when we start out what will work or not work, but where we can, we monitor what's most effective. And then we're able to share those results, good or bad, with others. So hopefully that others can learn from our mistakes and learn what does work. So we're able to then scale that impact by writing kind of how-to guides and sharing that information on what does work. So if you have a look on the Hubbub website, we've got loads of examples of that and the different projects that we've run. So I'm just going to talk you through briefly 4 examples of the kind of projects we've done that hopefully shows this a bit more clearly and is less theoretical. So one project we ran, which we wanted to try, this was the challenge that we were trying to tackle, was how you can stop young men on a night out from dropping cigarettes. So we observed that it was often young men who were dropping them, often stood outside pubs kind of drinking sort of late into the evening. And we came up with the concept of the ballot bin, which is in effect a voting ashtray. So we know that cigarettes are one of the most littered items in the world. They contain toxic chemicals and have plastic in them that can last up to take 13 years to break down. And so we knew it was this kind of audience that were mostly using them. So the challenge was sort of how to get them to care enough to dispose of that properly in a kind of fun, engaging way. So the ballot bin was developed, which is in effect enables a customizable question to be put anywhere. It can be changed sort of day to day. It can be very topical, related to the area that it's in. There's been some brilliant examples, so like the Thunberg and Trump one there. And it's now sold all over the world. We have a social enterprise arm, so that's something that we sell through that. And they're proven to reduce cigarette litter by 46%. So hopefully that that kind of nudge example just gives you an idea of how you can take kind of quite a mundane thing. It's almost the most socially acceptable form of litter to drop in some ways, and just make it a bit more interesting and engaging for people. So the initial concept was around sort of who's your favourite footballer to reach that audience. So another project we ran was around meat intake. So many of you will know, as global emissions linked to meat and dairy are really significant. And we also realised in the UK that about 60% of men exceeded their consumption of red and processed meats. So we wanted to work with quite a specific audience, particularly gym-going men who were particularly maybe concerned around kind of protein intake and consumption. So we came up with this concept of Meet Your Match, so it's MEAT, so sort of building on the competition element of going to the gym and sort of whether that's competing with yourself or others, but really setting yourself kind of ambitious challenges. So in terms of doing that, we gave each participant a Garmin fitness tracker. They had a consultation with a nutritionist, which gave them a sort of personalised meal plan over a 2-month period, and that we set them a challenge to try and reduce their meat by half. But actually we found that 80% of the participants had half the amount of the meat that they ate. With many more going on to continue that into the longer term. So I think part of that success was using that sense of competition and tapping into something that group already enjoyed doing, but also making it social, and that they could sort of share recipes and ideas and sort of discuss how they were finding it themselves. So the third example was relating to Black Friday. So it's been covered by others in terms of sort of the impacts of fast fashion and sort of pressures to buy a lot of things. So we did some polling research that found about half of people who bought things on Black Friday were buying things they didn't actually even need. And when you drill down to sort of specific audiences, even 18 to 24-year-olds often felt that they needed a new outfit every time they went out, and many would never even wear something twice, even on social media. So we wanted to provide kind of an inspiring alternative to this kind of pressure to purchase stuff that people didn't even need. So we came up with the idea of Bright Friday instead. So some of the interventions that we had, we created this giant installation which is toured around different high streets of a cube of clothing, and that represents how much clothing is thrown away every 3.5 minutes in the UK. We also created we had a sort of swap shops and repair sort of pop-up things in different high streets, but also a magazine called Faux, which is a sort of satirical magazine. It's actually one of my favourite hubbub things. I wasn't involved in it, but it just sort of highlights how ridiculous some of the sort of the side of fast fashion can be, and offers people alternatives as well. So there was around sort of 600 items of clothing swapped with those events, and quite a big media buzz created as well. So the last example was to talk about batteries in people's homes. So there's actually 178 million batteries lingering in people's drawers and cupboards that have been used and discarded, and only about 45% of them actually get recycled. But obviously they contain quite precious finite heavy metals that are really important to keep in circulation. So we wanted to find a way to recover these batteries and effectively bring back heavy metal. So we kind of built on that concept of linking it to kind of a music theme. We had, you can see here, quite sort of bold, iconic images, and it effectively ran a month-long tech amnesty, so people get to bring batteries back in store. So we had a website where they could search your local place to bring that back, and we got people to pose with this kind of finger sign, and on social media we had about 200 people doing that. and quite a lot of people engaging on a topic that if you probably talked about batteries, it wouldn't be something people were generally talking about on social media. So that was quite effective in managing to do that, and it's been running for a few years now. So that's just for case studies. So hopefully it kind of brings that example, that sort of theory to life a bit in terms of how we'd approach different campaigns and some of the behaviour change techniques. I just briefly wanted to mention Live Savvy. So this is our kind of umbrella kind of theme and hashtag comms campaign that we're running at the moment over the spring, really around how you can make your life kind of a bit more savvy and how to make the most of your time at home. So recognising that some people may have more time at home, you know, obviously might feel quite frustrated being stuck in. There can be a lot of pressures on finances, or having to sort of be a bit more flexible with some of the food that you're making and not able to get the same thing. So we've tried to offer sort of tips and inspiration for all kinds of things, from cooking more at home to growing, and stuff that you can do from today, maybe this week or this month. So it's sort of slightly staggered in terms of where people are at. So we've got quite a lot of content. We've been running sort of live events on social media as well, and we've created a communications pack of content. So if anybody was looking for content around where people can get started with sort of more sustainable things within their home, we'd be really happy to share that with you. So just drop me a line afterwards and I can do. So just in terms, lastly, to summarise some of those behaviour change techniques. So I think when you're thinking about like designing a campaign around trying to engage people on climate change or environmental issues, I think trying to think about some of these concepts can be really helpful. So can you sort of nudge or simplify something just to make it easier for people? People are busy, they have limited attention span. I'm sure as many sort of PR and marketing professionals, you will be brilliant at that anyway. Making it social where possible, so linking into what people are already doing, it's much more likely to kind of gain traction that way. Also disrupting the everyday, so how can you make something really stark and stand out, and people get into quite well-worn habits, so that can be really useful just to capture attention. Also immersing and educating people, so maybe through some kind of event that they're really getting that sense of kind of what something's about. And then last, also issuing rewards or competitions can be really effective. But lastly, I think it's mainly about telling kind of compelling stories, and that kind of emotional connection can be something that's quite powerful to get people engaged on topics that they might not be thinking about yet. So that's just kind of a summary of our approach. I mean, we are thinking quite a bit at the moment about how I guess the world has changed a lot, and how to maybe capture any of the more kind of positive elements of this period, and also how to shape that kind of in the future. So we're creating what we're hoping will be a sort of green print for sustainability for the UK, and doing some sort of business workshops and things. So if that's something that's anybody's interested in, then it'd be great to talk. We're always up for sort of collaborating. So we're on sort of every social media channel. We've also got a business and friends newsletter, so do please get in touch or follow them if you've some questions. Keep in touch. Great, that's everything from me.
Nice one, thanks very much, Jess. That was really good. It's always good to see how design thinking and creativity and like graphic design and, you know, these disruptive ideas can influence people in a positive way. So yeah, that's awesome. Okay, thank you very much. We are pretty much bang on time, which is incredible. Pretty much 5 o'clock, which leads us into our Q&A session. So whilst you're all typing away, thanking Jess for that awesome presentation, if anybody has any specific questions, either like raise your hand and wave and I can unmute you and I can ask the group, or type it in the chat box and we'll go from there. Ed, did I see your hand up?
Yep.
Nice. Okay, Ed, ask away. We can't hear you, Ed. You've
Trying. Am I unmuted now?
Yep, there you go.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Thank you. Brilliant presentations. Thank you, everybody. I just asked Will if I could potentially tell you about the scientists' warning. And I just wanted to make you aware, I've made speeches to a lot of Extinction Rebellion events and been stunned that many of them didn't know about scientists' warning. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knew. In 1992, there was a scientist warning issued to humanity, telling us everything we were doing wrong to the planet. And it was signed by 1,700 scientists, including all of the Nobel Prize winners in science at the time, or a majority of them. We did nothing. And in October 2017, another scientist's warning was issued, which it would be great if everybody would look at, and I can send details. And that was issued and is now signed by 21,000 scientists. And to give the impression, that's the lists of scientists in a book, all done, and there's a huge book of the names. Now, no one almost knows about it, and it's about the most convincing piece of science that I've ever read. Changed my life last year, and I've ended up on the board of Scientists Warning in the UK. But in addition, on the 5th of November, as Donald Trump tried pulling the US out of the Paris Accord, the Scientists Warning team issued the Scientists Climate Emergency Warning, and that has now been signed by more than 15,000 scientists. Please, everybody, mention it in any posts and things you're doing. And talking of collaboration, which I think Rob was mentioning, the Scientists Warning team in the UK has nobody supporting us on social media. And we would love experts or on PR to join us and help us in spreading the word. So anyway, I just wanted to contribute with that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Feel free to drop any social media links or website links in the chat, and we can add that to the mix of the discussions. Because yeah, it sounds like it's very important and something that needs raising awareness of. Does anybody have a specific question to one of the panel? If not, I have one. I have a few actually. So, because so Sarah, got a quick one for you. You mentioned in your presentation that we need to do the convergence of disciplines. It's an interesting phrase. Could you just tell us a bit more about what that might be in practical terms?
As well as in to avoid the convergence.
Into what, sorry?
As in to avoid the convergence. I think that's what most people tend to be worried about, is that it's just going to become one individual or one practice that does kind of a bit of everything. And I think the collaboration aspect offers PR pros an opportunity because we are so well versed in communication. And I think from what we've seen, particularly with the last presentation, sustainability and the adoption of it is so, communication is so central to it that it seems natural that PRs are going to lead on it. And I think they can recognise the different elements to bring in. So rather than it becoming sort of a little, heading under marketing somewhere, I think it has the opportunity to really drive that conversation, to drive action, and therefore avoid becoming not obsolete, but far, greatly reduced in importance.
Yep, that sounds good. You have a
question from Julie.
Julie, yeah. Like to
I think that is a really good question because it is the problem, and I would say that's actually down to the hiring process. I didn't hire anybody that I didn't trust, and I've never had anybody that I don't trust. And I think you have to recognise that at an earlier stage and actually take some responsibility for that as yourself as a leader. So if you don't trust your team you need to look at maybe why that is. Are there gaps in your leadership skills? Are the communication processes not correct in your organisation? Are people not talking to each other the way they should be? Are there other challenges? So I think you need to do a little bit of a deep dive into figuring out where things are maybe not right and what your actual concern is. So if people are working remotely, is your concern that they're not going to do anything and they're going to sit and watch daytime television all day? Because that will very quickly become apparent. If the work's not getting done, that will very quickly show its head. So that problem can be resolved fairly quickly, because the suddenly, if the work's not done, well, that's it. You can take steps to rectify that. Is it the control aspect, for example? So are you maybe micromanaging and you're not as hands-off as you should be in terms of leadership, where you're saying, right, okay, here are your tasks for the day or the week, get on with it, and trusting your team to do it? I think it's there's multiple answers to that question, really, but I think it has to start with the team you've got and the decisions and the skills that you have as a leader. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's good. I would like to also add something to that again. And it all really goes back to understanding, articulating, and embedding your values as an agency or a business into your team. Because if your team are doing, work that doesn't fulfill them, it's not meaningful work. Their job is to optimize the conversion rates on a t-shirt, sales page, which might be a very skillful job. It might not really excite them and keep them engaged, so they're perhaps more likely to, watch daytime TV and that kind of thing. So by shifting the work we do to more purposeful work and bringing your team on board with that as well, I think that will have a kind of automatic, improvement of team retention and engagement.
It does. I think it goes partly, and I really hate this term, but visions and values, and it makes me cringe a little bit. But as a management and as a leader, you have to make sure your team understands why you're all working towards something. They have to have some ownership over it, and that's what helps give them purpose. Because I want them to come to me with ideas and suggestions and ways forward. But in order for them to do that, I have to make them understand the links between what they're doing on a daily basis and the impact they're having and who we're working for, and actually where we want to go as a business as well. So who do we want to work for? Who are our target clients, and why are they our target clients? And then get their input that way as well. I know that Gary had mentioned it's hard to create alternatives. And I think it can be. We do a mixture of things. I mean, probably as an example, to retain that culture and situation we're in at the moment, I've been doing really mad things with my team. So we have a weekly catch up on a Wednesday, which is a standard catch up. But I do them a daily update and I do them a daily bulletin, and I've done it through standard WhatsApp messaging. I've left post-it notes on the office plants that I took home so they didn't die. And I don't have a great track record with houseplants, so I put post-it notes on them saying, I'm still alive, by the way, here's some info related to our updates today, whether it's client or work. And I posted them round, and I did it that way. I wrote a message on a big whiteboard, and I've done pictures and I've done voice notes. So it's just finding different ways to keep them engaged with us while we are all separate. And we do see each other face to face on a regular basis, but it is just thinking. I mean, we are creative, so it's a way of thinking creatively around communication. And I think what is afforded us right now is a little bit of humour and a little bit of fun. And we've seen that from virtual backgrounds that we've put in place and everything, that people are just a little bit more relaxed, I think, in terms of the corporate rules that exist. And for us in PR, I think we can afford to play with that a little bit and make sure that we bring our team along with us.
Yeah, I agree. That was a very good answer. Does anybody have another question for anybody in the group?
Hey, Will, I've got a question here. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Ben. Yep, go ahead.
Hey, yeah. Just to clarify a quick point about that video being green, how green's video versus to travel. It's not cut and dry. My main point was that video has an impact. It's often not thought about. So there's some info from the Carbon Trust that talks about, I think it's about a 5-mile trip in a car. If you're traveling longer than 5 miles in a car, it's better from a carbon perspective to work from home. That will more than offset the heating emissions. So, you know, it's just that I was just really saying that it's something that needs to be thought about. But my question is to the whole room, really. I've had to dip in and out of the session today with other commitments, but I'm not sure if it's come up or not. But the Albert model for telly, has it been discussed?
No, it hasn't, Ben.
No, okay. So please check it out if you can. It's a great model. It's for most of the big TV organisations have signed up to it, and just most of the big TV organisations have signed up to it, and it's looking at creative content. So what can media do to start pushing messages about the real challenges that we're facing? And I'm wondering about its applicability to the agency sector. Obviously, they're a bit more having to follow the requests of the clients, but I do think it's definitely got some legs. So it'd be great.
I think that we have lost you, Ben, but I think that we got most of your point there. Yeah, I've been looking into the album model a fair bit and how we can recreate something within the creative digital sector. I think they've got a lot of really good guidances. So I posted the link into the chat. I recommend we all check it out, especially if we do, you know, encounter any video production teams in our work. We can, you know, extend that into them. I have a question for Rob, actually. Would you say, and this might be one where Jess can jump into, is Leeds doing any better than any other city, and where has had the most uptake, would you say?
When you say it, what are you thinking?
Okay, what, sorry?
When you said is Leeds doing it, you mean more just generally looking at sustainability?
Yeah, is Leeds doing better in terms of, like, you know, these recycling things and sustainable city?
Yeah.
Like, how does it compare across the rest of the UK?
Yeah. I mean, Jess might be able to give a more kind of country-wide perspective, or from at least from other work that they've done at Hubbub. I mean, I think some real positives in Leeds. I think if you look broadly at things around the climate emergency, I think the fact that the city declared a climate emergency is a real positive. I think there was a really interesting piece of work that people might have come across called a climate jury, where there were a dozen people from across the city were chosen to look in depth at issues around the climate emergency and what the city should do. And you know, no process is perfect, but it was a really interesting, deliberative kind of piece of work that got a range of people, some of whom are really into this stuff and some of whom it's totally new, and they came up with some really good recommendations for the city. And then I think there is, as I've said before, you know, there'll be people in this meeting who are involved with stuff. There's some really good grassroots work going on in the city to think how we work this kind of stuff out. And then specifically around kind of on-the-go recycling, I mean, I think the good thing about Leeds by example was that Hubbub worked on it because it was recognised that there were very few, if any, cities in the country that were offering people the opportunity to recycle whilst they were out and about. So we made a big difference with Hubbub's kind of real strong support over 12 months in terms of the amount that was recycled in the city centre. And then that's gone to 2 other cities, Swansea and Edinburgh, kind of now. So yeah, so I think there's there's so much to do, isn't there? But I think Leeds is doing pretty well in a lot of ways. So, but Jess will have another perspective, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I've got like a kind of really robust overview of every city in the country, but I think there's been, 270 odds climate emergencies now declared by different local authorities. And that, while that's brilliant, I guess what you need to start seeing is kind of action and what that actually means. And I personally loved working in Leeds for 12 months, and I think that it's quite clear that the city seems to be actually sort of trying to do quite a lot to address that and tackle climate change and work collaboratively across every kind of sector. I mean, I was really amazed at the kind of, as Rob said, the amount of sort of grassroots activity and different organisations and businesses actually really kind of being up for doing something. There's obviously a lot of kind of creative capacity in the city and major sort of business headquarters as well as sort of good educational establishments. So I think there's actually an amazing opportunity for Leeds to really kind of continue pioneering some of that work. And there's, in a way, the Leeds by Example brand, which is sort of now there to talk about the climate emergency, that some of the foundations are laid. And I think, with organisations like yourselves on board and everybody sort of talking to their own networks, that's a really good place to start. I think a lot of work has been done. And so I would definitely, my impression is that Leeds would be ahead of many other places in the UK.
Good.
Keep going.
Yep. That's the thing. So I mean, the actual name Leads by Example is fantastic. Especially if we are actually leading by example. Other cities can use the framework that we're making and roll out. Just on the fact that we are all in lockdown, I'd just like to open this to everybody else. So ask the guests here a question. If anybody wants to jump in, what's been the biggest change that you've actually felt that is a good thing that you'd like to keep, and what you will take into your business practice going forward? Does anybody have any good examples that they'd like to share? Mark, you're on now.
Hi there. Yeah, it's kind of slightly an answer to that question, but I've sort of been thinking about. So I think Jess was talking about sort of the really great creative things that they've been doing, and there's some brilliant ideas. I don't know if anyone who's been in the centre recently has seen out and about the use of advertising spaces at the moment to talk about some of the sort of big messaging that are very unique to the situation at the moment. So there's kinds of, I sort of understand that perhaps there's advertising space not being used for other things, so it's an opportunity. But something I'd love to see is how we can find a way to do something similar with positive messages around sustainability. So there's obviously a kind of issue around how you fund that, but actually just to see some of these messages out and about in the sort of busy places where you would normally be, rather than just standard advertising messaging. It just seems like a really good thing to be able to extend somehow.
Yeah. In fact, that sort of reminds me of this billboard campaign that happened a few years ago. It may have been in Scotland or somewhere, but basically, I'm not sure exactly who it was, but a load of billboards were basically like billboard spaces were sort of bought up, and they had art, replacing the adverts. And it was just all about, commenting on how public space has been used to infect the mind and like sell us things. So let's take that over, put some nice art up that doesn't have any agenda. It's just, a kind of nourishing thing. So yeah, that sort of thing will be fantastic to see post lockdown.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm.
I will. I've got something to add.
Yep.
All right. So, so working for an energy company, whereby sort of everyone now is living at home and consuming more energy, it's made me sort of realise the impact that this is having. I can't remember how much. I think it was like 20% more energy is being used within households. And when it comes to your energy supplier, price is always going to be the sort of dominating factor as to who provides your energy, unless you're obviously a concerned citizen. But maybe you might look at how we actually, because it's one of those sort of sustainability outcomes which has various other intrinsic benefits. Obviously, you reduce your energy, you reduce your overall cost, and if you've got an energy supplier that has 100% sort of renewable electricity, you're also doing your bit for the environment as well. So I think it allows us to sort of look at ourselves. How can we be more energy efficient? Where is our energy sourced from? And whether that means going to maybe more of an expensive but more sustainable tariff might be better sort of for your own personal values and actions.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that that even though household energy has increased, is that not kind of offset by the decrease in industry and other high intensity energy uses across the country and indeed the world?
So I guess you're shifting it, aren't you? You're shifting it from the workplace to the household. So it'd be a good measure to see whether the actual overall energy usage has increased or decreased. I know household has increased by about 20%, but I don't know whether that is detracted from what would be workplace setting. I'm not sure. Be interesting to look into. Yeah,
fair enough. Whilst we have some of you still here, I'm sure everybody's like logging off because it's getting on a bit. I'd just like to direct you to Facebook page for this, this group and these kind of conversations. You're welcome to join and continue the conversation after this. I'd just like to thank everybody for being here. Does any of our guest speakers have a final point they want to say, or a question that have been asked in the chat that I've not picked up on?
I think that retailers have been, now that everyone's messaging's changing and people aren't forcing their marketing down people's throats because they think it's not appropriate, and they're using platforms to start sharing things that people care about more. So like sustainable self-care, and brands are putting out a helping hand and offering so much more, and developing relationships right now rather than going for the hard sell. I really hope that stays.
Yeah. Ed?
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Maybe I just want to put a question out to everybody, but particularly those in bigger, hard-hitting digital agencies and things. The threat is huge, and changing our shopping habits now, changing by 20% the way we eat our food and all that sort of thing is all too late. Okay, the IPCC, and Ben referred to it, has said we have to cut carbon emissions in the world now, starting last year, by more than 7.5% a year every single year for 10 years. And if we don't do it now, it's 15% a year in 5 years' time. Carbon budgets that are being used up, so that's the amount of carbon we pump into the air to keep us under 1.5 degrees, the UK at the current rate uses up its carbon budget in 2024. Lights out, no more in the UK, or we pollute the world and damage it. The world's carbon budget runs out in 2028. It's not about only the small incremental changes, which, although good and nudge us forward, are not enough. The big movement can happen online. There's lots of experts here listening. How do we make it happen?
I guess that's the question we are working towards today, Ed. It is a big thing, obviously, and I'm sure if we continue having these conversations and act upon them, you know, and join forces and not all be working in isolation and understanding the level of the threat, you know, that can only be, you know, the start in getting more and more people involved. Because you're right that we need quite huge action. But on an individual level, maybe the smaller steps get people thinking, and then they can leap into, you know, the bigger life changes that are needed, like, you know, stopping eating meat, stopping flying, you know, basically stop mass consumption, and you know, ending fast fashion, etc. All the points that we've touched upon today. It's not easy, and it can be quite depressing when you think about it and when you understand, you know, the situation that we're in. But what can we do? We've got to do something in whatever capacity that we can, and then increase that as we go. So, on that note of urgency, does anybody have any? Oh, is that Ben? I can hear.
Yeah, just a quick response to Ed's question. I think this is a storytelling exercise for me, and that's why I'm particularly interested in the creative industries and the arts. I think enough people, a critical mass of people, need to have a deep personal understanding of the danger that we're in as a society and what the current trajectory will end up in, and only that way will we get the answers that we want, basically. So, you know, that's the question for me.
Can I just add to that? I think there's quite a lot of the idea of put a positive spin on it, give people the positive idea that they can move forward, and these changes that we talked about today do make a difference. But my view isn't what everybody thinks, is that, like Ben just said, you've got to recognize the massive threat to our civilization and to many, many, many humans all over the planet. And it's massive. You've got to be like a drug addict, realizing you've got the problem to reach up for help. And my feeling is you've got to tell people the bad news in order to get them to reach out for help. I know that's not what everybody feels. And some feel the positive nudging is the way to do it. But that's my view. I'd be interested in other people's.
I think when it comes to sort of behaviour change and changes in general, I think people respond to things that they personally experience. So with regards to recycling, it's like a low cost behaviour, which is quite easy to change. It's not habitual. But when it comes to sort of commuting, not going on a summer holiday anymore, these are high cost changes that people are sort of less willing to commit to. However, if you personally experience the wildfires in Australia and relate that directly back to your individual action of flying, eating, sort of meat consumption, I think that's the trigger point, making people relate it to their locality and then make them see the bigger picture. And that's the only way you're going to get sort of mass scale of change.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Hubbub's approach is definitely those kind of small individual behaviours and activities in your daily life. But I guess the scale of the problem requires action from everybody and lots of different approaches. And, you know, some of that will be kind of campaign and lobby groups. There's obviously a lot of kind of policy needed and big structural change. But I think that it can be incredibly powerful, that kind of that value, as James just mentioned, of a social norm and people sort of doing it because they see others doing it. I think what's really interesting now is whether the kind of the nature of that conversation around climate change, which maybe before has been quite kind of overwhelming for people in the sense that they maybe switched off, and that we now have a bit of a sense of what kind of an emergency looks like in our current situation, and how, while this is a kind of longer term one that people might not all be seeing the immediate impact of, I think it's an interesting opportunity to try and maybe reframe some of that and you know, get people to act, really.
Yeah.
Can I just comment on I mean, Hubbub's done a lot of great stuff nudging people forward. It really has been in a lot of different areas, and it's very noticeable. And one thing, though, which would be really brilliant is by nudging them on in one area, if we can then get them to open themselves up to the huge climate crisis problem, so they don't nudge in one area, they suddenly add 25 other areas on, and they either join Extinction Rebellion or Friends of the Earth or Greenpeace or donate or do something bigger, use their skills for the planet. So that Hubbub's initial very, very positive step, and I've been working on World No Disposable Cup Day, which is just one example of sort of thing Hubbub does dozens of, is you nudge people through and then you get them to the point they can open the conversation on, you know, mass extinction of animals, migration of 1 billion people, wars over water, half the planet unlivable in 20 years time or 30 years time, because they aren't going to open that conversation immediately you talk to them. But if you've nudged them, Leeds by example, you've nudged them on cigarettes and Messi and whether he's the best, or you've nudged them on no disposable cups, they then tend to be open to the conversation. And any of the organizations I've worked with have struggled to move from that incremental, very positive change into the big picture, which we so desperately need. So creative minds really need to put themselves around that and see where we can move. I don't know if Hubbub has a view on, when you've got them to move the incremental one, which is great, is there a bigger picture to move them further on?
Definitely, and that's something we try to do. We have a theory of change, so we always sort of 3 stages. We try to initially just light a spark of an idea, so just to raise awareness and get people to think differently about an issue. So whether that's their cigarette butt or battery, you know, whatever that small thing is, and then to actually change their behaviour around that, but mainly to aim towards having a lasting kind of impact and to really transform their thinking on an area. So that would always be our ultimate ambition for any campaign or project that we run. We try to get them ideally signed up to our newsletters, and so they can hear about other campaigns, and by changing one aspect of their life, it's then hopefully evolves into others. But it's definitely something that we're going to be talking about more broadly and looking at the climate emergency in the next year. So really thinking about that much more kind of transformative change at a kind of household level, working with one audience or city. So yeah, that's definitely something we're looking at, and you know, very conscious that that needs to happen.
Thank you, Jess and Ed. I think this is so important that we are pushed on this, especially in my industry. Like at the moment, most agencies and digital sort of creatives, they're not thinking about this at all. They're just focused on increasing the sales for the people that give them money, and if they can do a few small changes, like perhaps buy more ethical coffee or something, they will do that. So what I'm hoping to achieve with all this is shifting the conversation and getting people like myself in the industry to reassess our values, and that only starts when you know what's really happening, and not just kind of, you know, scan through the headlines and say, oh yeah, it's really bad, but what can we do? But really feel it and feel that they can do something about it, or at least, you know, start the ball rolling. So yeah, so if we can all, you know, take these conversations into our workplaces, that'll be a start, and obviously reflect on your own roles and responsibilities and your influence within your network. and reflect on your own consumption and your lifestyle. And as much as business as usual is the issue, we've got to make the business case for sustainability. You know, like Fiona's talk was very good in that respect. You know, because we are living in a very interesting time where there is a lot of kind of appetite for, you know, sustainability and environmental action. It's just whether people really change. And, you know, and I think this is where the whole nudge element comes into it, to nudge them from a state of awareness and probably fear and inaction to a state of feeling empowered. And that's what we are trying to do today. So yeah, I'd say that we all need to, you know, lead by example as best we can, to take a phrase. So on that note, it's just gone 5:30. Unless there's any more comments or questions or discussions, I'd like to wrap it up. Are we all good?
All good, Will.
Yeah, thanks very much for organising, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We shall meet again soon. I'm arranging a few of these over the next few months, and I'm hoping to put together a bit of a steering group of people in the digital design world to help shape our response as an industry. So if you want to be part of that, you've got my contact. There's a Facebook group I've added, and yeah, and Ed, I'd be very interested in chatting to you again, and having your involvement in moving this forward. So thank you all again, and I shall see you all in the future. Have a great week and stay safe.
Cheers, Will. All the best.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.